County Zoning Board to order. Will the secretary call the roll?
Mary Beth Taylor.
Here.
Brian Bangert. Michael Kuritz.
Here.
Rick Dean.
Here.
Julia Turner.
Here.
Ruth Novosad.
Here.
Jim Finnegan.
Here.
Greg Zimmerman.
Here.
We have a quorum so we can conduct business. Has everyone looked at the meeting or the minutes from the last meeting?
Yes.
So would somebody like to make a motion to approve?
Move that we approve minutes of the previous meeting as written. Second.
Second.
Yeah, we have a motion by Kurtz, a second by Zimmerman. Can we have a roll call vote?
Taylor.
Yes.
Kuritz.
Yes.
Dean.
Yes.
Turner.
Yes.
Novosad.
Yes.
Finnegan.
Yes.
Zimmerman.
Yes.
Motion passes. This time I'm going to affirm the staff, if that's all right.
Yeah.
Do solemnly and sincerely declare and affirm that the testimony given in this case now and hearing will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, or you suffer the pains and penalties of perjury.
I do.
Do you have something you want to read into the record?
Yes. If the case heard tonight is finished and the ZBA has discussed it and voted on it, the case will be considered complete. If the case is not finished, or if the go-to-meeting system crashes, or the ZBA members are not able to adequately communicate before a vote is taken on a case by the ZBA, the case will be continued until 7:30 p.m. on Tuesday, April 6, 2021. Please contact the Department of Building and Zoning at 309-888-5160 for a link to this meeting or attend the meeting in person. The ZBA bylaws allow the chair to impose time limits on opening, closing, or other statements or questions
Or the other way.
or any portion of the proceedings. The chair will limit questioning of witnesses to one series of questions per person per witness. A note for those watching via YouTube live stream. The YouTube stream is not an interactive medium. Any comments on the YouTube live stream are not monitored and will not be addressed in the meeting. Please mute your phones or computers and turn your cameras off unless you are on the ZBA or you are approved to speak.
Thank you. We need to call an appearance of anybody that is not on the thing tonight, or does anybody ask you about that, Phil, that wants to speak to us?
Nobody has requested to speak on something not on the agenda.
Okay, we're going to move on then. Going to call the first case, and the only case, SU 2016.
This is case number SU-20-16, application of Joshua Scharf for special use to allow a single-family dwelling in the agriculture district for a farm owner, the child of a farm owner, for a dwelling for a farm owner, son and family of a farm owner, on land unsuitable for farming due to unusual size and configuration, wooded areas, and slopes exceeding 5%, and unique circumstances. On property which is part of the north quarter of Section 6, Township 21 North, Range 2 East to the 3rd Principal Meridian, located in Randolph Township, immediately west of 1300 East Road, approximately 1/2 mile south of 200 North Road. Public notice of this hearing was published in the Panagraph on December 19, 2020, as provided by law. All the other required notifications have been made. The applicant has paid the publication cost. This case was actually published again. This was published again in February. And the publication cost has been paid. The first exhibit that I have in this case is the application and a signed agricultural nuisance disclaimer. And this is a zoning map that's on the screen, and the purple part of it is in the village of Hayworth, and the subject property is outlined in red there. And this is the subject property here too that is outlined in red, and it is immediately east of the village of Hayworth property that is in the M1 manufactured district. We have a communication from David Schaefer, who's the city engineer, who indicates that this property is to the west, is in the village of Hayworth, and a special use permit was approved on this property for gravel extraction. Could you go back again, Daryl? To the next one, please. So this one here, please. The subject property is outlined in red. That's a triangle piece to the east and south, and the part where the applicant proposes to build a house is outlined in green, and the other larger property outlined in red is referred to as a farm property by the applicant, of which there's a piece at the south labeled with 5.3 acres of land and crop production, and then a 1.4 acre piece to the north and west, and then a piece to the north and west further of 5 acres that's in crop production. The property to the west is not in this parcel, is not in the farm property identified in the special use. We have a communication from the Soil and Water Conservation District indicating that they did a soil score on this property. It has a soil score of 95.9. This was included in the land valuation and site assessment that was incorporated into the staff report. A communication from the health department indicating that there's apparently an area on the property they could put a septic system on it if need be. And a communication from the Randolph Township Road Commissioner indicating that they can get an entrance to the public road at that location. And there's a narrative that is provided by the applicant that he will present. And the following are and I'll deliver the staff report at this time. Pardon? We'll show the photos of the property first before the staff report. This is the public road facing north. And this is the public road facing south. The property is on the right or to the west. And this is the subject property on the right where the applicant proposes to build a house. And this is also that property. This is toward the north end of that piece of property that has been in crop production this past season. And then facing across it to the southwest. And the farm property to the west that's in the village of Hayworth is coming up. This is across the road to the east, immediately across the township road to the east in crop production. And this is some of the property that's north of the farm acreage on the subject property, part of the property in the floodplain. And this is the larger, it used to be called the urban pit, gravel pit that's been in production for 40 years. And this is the entrance to that gravel pit. And the subject property is outlined in red here where the applicant proposed to build a house, and the property where the gravel pit is to the west. The size of the parcel is 27.5 acres. 6.7 acres are relatively flat, and they're to the floodplain where it slopes down to the Kickapoo Creek. The drainage is to the north and west. The vegetation has been crop production, and the property that's in the floodplain is in woods. Public road is an oil and a ship road, 15 feet in width. The land to the north is M1 Restricted Manufacturing District in the village of Hayworth. The land to the south is in the Agriculture District. The land to the east is in the Agriculture District. The land to the west is in the M1 District in the village of Hayworth. The surrounding land use to the north is a gravel pit. To the south is a residence. To the east is crop production. And to the west is a gravel pit. The land evaluation and site assessment has a soil score of 95.9 out of a maximum of 100 points. The site assessment has a score of 132 points out of a maximum of 200 points, giving it a total score of 207 points out of a maximum of 300 points. The LISA report indicates that a total score of 219 and below means that the property is of low value for agricultural land protection. The staff analysis of the standards in the ordinance are as follows. 1, the proposed special use will not be detrimental to or endanger the health, safety, morals, comfort, or welfare of the public. This standard is not met. The zoning ordinance allows for dwellings to be built in the agriculture district on land unsuitable for agricultural uses. The subject 27.5 acre property is located along the Kickapoo Creek, of which approximately 21 acres is wooded, slopes down to the creek, and is in the Kickapoo Creek floodplain. Approximately 6.7 acres of the property is out of the floodplain, is relatively flat, and is in crop production. The applicant proposes to build a dwelling on this 6.7 acres of land that is in crop production, and this 6.7 acres is relatively flat, does not vary even 2 feet in elevation across it, and does not qualify for land unsuitable for farming. The applicant states that he is the son and owner of the farm from which this property is being set aside. The zoning ordinance allows single-family residences and the subdivision of parent tracts in the agriculture district for a farm owner or for a son or daughter of a farm owner. The applicant claims that the subject 27.5 acre property along with the adjacent 208 acres is part of a 236 acre farm. The 208 acre property is in the village of Hayworth and is in the M1 Restricted Manufacturing District with a special use for gravel extraction. And only approximately 12 of these 208 acres remain in crop production. According to the zoning ordinance, a farm is a tract of land of 40 acres or more in size and is used for agricultural uses. The remaining 208 acres after the 27.5 acres is subtracted is not in the agriculture district, nor is it a farm. Therefore, this application does not qualify for a dwelling for a farm owner or for a son of the farm owner on this criteria, since the parent tract is not in the agriculture district and the 208 acres from which the subject property is set aside is not a farm, since only 12 acres is an agricultural use. The 6.7 acre farm field on this property does not qualify as a unique circumstance on which to build a dwelling in the agriculture district, since there are many similar farm fields in the agriculture district in the county that would also qualify. 2, the proposed special use will not be injurious to the use and enjoyment of other property in the immediate vicinity for purposes already permitted or substantially diminish property values in the immediate area. This standard is not met. The applicant states that the dwelling is proposed to be built on land unsuitable for agricultural uses. A crop was produced this past season on the precise location where the proposed dwelling is to be built. Ordinarily, a dwelling would be built on a property like this as a permitted use on 1 to 3 acres of the property that is not suitable for agricultural uses. However, the only area of this property that is not suitable for agricultural use is in the floodplain, and it is not appropriate to build a dwelling in the floodplain. The intent of the agriculture district is to provide for the location and govern the establishment and use of limited non-farm dwellings. 3, the proposed special use will not impede the orderly development of the surrounding property for uses permitted in the district. This standard is not met. The application does not fulfill any of the criteria on which to approve a non-farm residence in the agriculture district. The 77-acre property to the northeast is in crop production. The 80-acre property to the east is in crop production. The 70-acre property to the southeast is in crop production. The 208-acre property to the west and north is in the village of Hayworth in the M1 restricted manufacturing district with a special use for gravel extraction. 4, adequate utilities, access roads, drainage, or other necessary facilities have been or will be provided. This standard is met. The health department recommends approval of this special use. The proposed dwelling would be served by a private well and septic system approved by the county health department. The property has approximately 1,470 feet of frontage on the west side of 1300 East Road. 5, adequate measures have been or will be taken to provide ingress and egress so designed as to minimize traffic congestion in the public streets. And this standard is met. It appears that safe site distance can be provided at the proposed entrance on 1300 East Road. The applicant has obtained approval for a driveway entrance from the Randolph Township Road Commissioner. 6, the establishment, maintenance, and operation of the special use will be in conformance with the intent of the district in which the special use is to be located, and this standard is not met. The intent of the agriculture district is to provide for the location and govern the establishment and use of limited non-farm dwellings. This application does not qualify under any of the limitations on the construction of new single-family residences in the agriculture zoning district. 7, the proposed special use in all other respects conforms to the applicable regulations of the district in which it is located. This standard is not met. The application does not qualify under any of the limitations on the construction of new single-family residences in the agriculture zoning district. In conclusion, staff recommends that this application does not meet all the standards set forth in Article 8, Section 350-56, which is standards for special use permits, nor does it qualify under any of the limitations on the construction of new single-family residences in the agriculture district. That concludes my report.
You guys will make an opening statement?
No,
No opening statement?
no, but I do have a comment to start.
Well, come forward. Now, swear again.
Sure.
Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you give in this case now and hearing be the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
Please state your name and address to the record.
My name is Brian Hugg. My address is 11 Bailey Court, Bloomington, Illinois.
Is that okay, Phil?
Yes.
I would like to address one thing before we get started with the case, and that is I was told today, late in the morning, that I would not be allowed to use a presentation before the board. I feel that puts us at a distinct disadvantage because staff just did a presentation, and I feel that it doesn't give us a fair opportunity, doesn't give us due process for a full hearing. I'd just like that to be reflected in the record because staff just went through and explained and presented pictures and maps and stuff. It's exactly the same sort of thing I wanted to do. And staff has told me, actually Mr. Dick himself just told me this morning, sent me an email this morning, said I couldn't do that. So has the board got a rule against that? Where am I at on this?
I don't know, Phil. Could you answer the question, please?
Since we have had public hearings after the pandemic, we had at least one hearing where people were not able to see the videos that were proposed by applicants, so we haven't allowed them to have any exhibits except verbal explanation of what's going on. We had to close one of our public hearings because of it, and so we have not used them since then. Mr. Hug sent me something early this morning. He's made this application since November. He decided this morning at 6 a.m. he wanted to do some kind of an exhibit, and I told him we haven't allowed it since the pandemic has started, except for the one case with it was Geronimo. They proposed an exhibit, and one of the people on the phone couldn't see what was going on, and so we continued the public hearing. And so since then, we have not had any such exhibit.
I guess my thought was that we didn't do that because we had objectors and they couldn't see the presentation. But tonight we have, would everybody be able to see the presentation that's on the board? Just a question.
Ms. Turner wouldn't be able to see it. I think she's on the phone.
I'm now on the computer.
Doesn't look like we have any objectors. So I don't know if we could use them or not. I'm just asking a question. I don't want to cause a problem.
Yeah.
Our situation is going to be next month. We're going to have something where there are likely going to be objectors, and they're going to want to have a significant exhibits if we're going to allow them.
It appears to me, Phil, that we have no one externally here who wants to view it. Am I mistaken in that?
I think what Phil's saying is precedent's been set that we don't have presenters. And now if we allow them, is it setting new precedent? And we've generally had the rule. And if we continue to have meetings like this, going back and forth is going to be difficult.
Well, it's the issue that we won't be able to, may or may not be able to see them on the computer. But going forward, if there are exhibits that want to be presented, can they be part of the packet? I don't know if the exhibits tonight are important enough that we need to postpone a hearing and have individual packets mailed to the board members, or I know that won't help someone who is attending that wants to view them, but.
Council just talked to me and said that we might be able to amend that for tonight, say we could do it for tonight, not be in trouble for anything forward. You want to speak to that?
My suggestion is that if someone on the board wanted to make a motion to go ahead and hear evidence in this way for today, then the board could decide if that's something they want to do and make it for this case right now today.
I would move that we allow testimony from the presenter only on a case, and going forward, this would just be on a case-by-case basis. I propose we allow it this evening.
I'll second it.
Okay, we have a motion by Dean, a second by Kurtz. Do we have a vote on
it? Taylor?
I vote yes to approve that.
Kurtz?
Yes.
Dean?
Yes.
Turner?
Yes.
Novosad?
Yes.
Finnegan?
Yes.
Zimmerman.
Yes.
Okay, Daryl will go up into the room 404 up there to grab the thumb drive.
I can get started before he has this on. Do you want to go ahead and get started?
We're in no bigger hurry. So if you, I don't know how long it's going to be, but if you want to, if you got something you want to say, go ahead. If you don't want
Well,
pictures.
the only thing I want to say, well, there's a couple of things I want to say. One is some of the pictures on here were part of the application, and some of the information that I have were part of the application. But from my perception of the entire application didn't go out to the board. So if you received those pictures, I didn't, and I supposedly received the everything. But the application didn't was more complete than what you've been provided. The other thing I'd like to note is the staff just stated that the soil score on the property was 95.9, yet the report from staff reflects a soil score of 75.9.
I noticed that too.
Now, that's a significant difference, and it'll be a matter I talk about in a little bit. Because I'm off. Work for you? There. Mr. Chairman, I'll be calling Stephanie Scharf and Josh Scharf. Do you want to swear them both in at this time?
Sure. Look over. Would you like to be sworn in or heard? Sworn in? You solemnly swear that the testimony you give in this case now and hearing be the truth, whole truth, nothing but truth shall be God.
Yes.
You state your name and addresses for the record one at a time.
Stephanie Scharf, 1214 South Oak Street, Bloomington.
Just, you need to stand here so they can see you on the screen.
Joshua Scharf, 1214 South Oak Street, Bloomington, Illinois.
Could you repeat the address, please?
1214 South Oak Street, Bloomington, Illinois.
Just relax, we won't bite you.
Could I clear up the Lisa score again? The soil score was 75.9. And the site assessment was 132. And that's the same on the staff report and what I got from Soil and Water. So I'm not sure exactly what the correction needs to be made.
I think he transposed it 75.9.
Yeah, he sort of just misspoke it, I think. Bill.
It probably didn't change the number, but I think you transposed the two numbers on the soil score on the top, and you said 95.7.
Yeah, it is not 95.7. It's 75.9 for soil.
Sure.
Are you ready for testimony?
We're ready for whatever you want to do.
I'm ready. Why don't you step up here? And we need to be close enough that both of us
Yeah, sure.
See yourself right there.
Oh, okay.
Okay. You've already given your address. Where is that address generally in Bloomington?
It's by the old Lincoln School. It's near Miller Park, in that area.
And this is a home that you're looking to build for your future, is that right?
Correct.
And would you call it your forever home?
Yes.
And you've been looking for a home for a few years now, is that right?
Yep.
Okay. And where else have you looked?
We looked off West Washington Street and then off Route 9. And then a few other properties that the family owns.
And you've also looked at more small
Yes,
towns?
more other small towns that didn't require bulk building, yeah.
And were there some problems with these other properties?
Yeah, we were told by the city and the county that we couldn't build on these pieces of land because they were going to be used for other things.
Directing your attention to the property that we're here for today, you've been out there, I take it,
Yes.
a number of times?
Oh, yeah.
And why is this property important to you?
It's most important because it's in a smaller school district. My husband and I both went to smaller schools, and we have 2 daughters, and we want to put our daughters in smaller schools, so that's the most important thing. Also, it's closer to my family, which is in Mount Pulaski. So it's kind of halfway between where Josh works and my family.
And you actually did some research on the school district?
Yes, there's much smaller class sizes compared to up here in Bloomington, and that's just something that my husband and I really want, and they also have really great graduation rates, so that's something important to us too.
Is there anything else you'd like to say to the zoning board of appeals?
As I said before, we plan for this to be our forever home, and we really appreciate it if you approve this special use.
Any questions?
We're gonna ask questions to the board.
Yep.
Does anyone on the board have questions of this witness? Don't just jump up there now. Doesn't look like any questions.
Josh? Josh, make sure you're in the picture. You are in the picture. Okay. We want to talk about some other stuff before we talk about the property, but where are you employed?
Carry Sharp Materials,
And how long have you been employed there?
about 15 years.
And what do you do for them?
I run heavy equipment, drive a truck, and do a little bit of mechanics.
And you're also a stockholder, owner of the company?
Yes.
And the company is actually started by your mom and dad?
Yes.
And that company is still family owned?
Yes.
There's no outside investors? Okay. And now, are you aware that Carry Sharp Materials owns other farmland in McLean County and other places in Illinois?
Yes.
And so you own property to the north of this property, about 170 acres, is that correct?
Yes.
And then to the west, about a mile or two west, there's another 240 acres?
Yes.
And then there's some land in McLean County, and there's some land in, I don't know. Do you have some land in Wisconsin too?
Yes.
Okay. So the company owns a fair amount of farmland.
That's correct.
Would you say it's 700 or 800 acres easy?
Right around there.
Okay. You and Stephanie have been looking for a home to put your family in, and you've looked at a number of places?
Yes.
Okay. And there were, for a number of reasons, the other sites weren't acceptable. Is that fair?
That's correct.
And one of those reasons was the city said that the land you were seeking was in the city's planning district, and they just didn't own any land, anybody to build there yet.
Yes.
Okay. Stephanie talked about the location of this being special for her. What's special about this location for you?
It's for 2 daughters to go to a good school, and it's out in the country.
Okay, and what are your daughters' ages?
2 and 8 months.
And what are the names?
Raylan and Olivia.
And you also had a desire to live near the timber,
Yes.
and you've been out to this location a number of times?
Yeah.
And you've walked around the location?
Yes.
Have you been into the timber?
A little bit, yes.
Okay. And it's a little rough back there?
Just a little bit. Needs cleaned up.
You and I share an experience, not at the same time, but you and I share an experience in that timber, right?
Yes.
And what was that?
Well, we both fell down going down the hill.
And,
Accidentally.
and that's because the hill is extremely steep.
Oh, yes.
Now, I've been there, and some of the hill, I fell down the hill about this 10 or 12 feet high. And do you remember which one you fell on?
It was steep. I don't
Okay.
really recall how deep it was.
Okay. And is it fair to say that the timber is very, very thick?
Very.
And I guess you told me you some places you have to hack your way through it.
Yes.
And are there trees in that timber that are huge?
Oh, yeah.
When I say huge, do we have trees? A number of the trees are 36 inches in diameter and bigger,
Yes.
and there's hundreds of trees back in there.
Yes.
Okay. And you've had some experience clearing some land, some farmland for farming. Is that correct?
Yes.
And the North Acres, the North farm with 170 acres, you had some experience clearing that for farming.
Yes.
And when you did that, some of that timber was sold too. Is that right?
Yes.
Did you think you would do something similar to this property, or what were you planning for this property?
No, my plan would be to clean up the property and to possibly plant some more trees.
Okay. Is there a reason that planting crops in this lowland doesn't work for you?
I mean, you can't plant when there's trees around. I mean, that's just my opinion.
And have you've been in this area? You've been to this area many, many times, right? What's the flooding experience that you're acquainted with?
Well, I've seen the water get up almost to the bridge, and it's flooded the entire area where all the trees are at.
Okay. We've talked about this a little bit, but not before the board. Do you have some plans for the area that is tillable?
Yes, if the current tenant farmer wants to farm it, you can.
Okay. You don't plan to use all of that for your house?
No.
And there's a number of neighbors south to you that do the same with their properties, is that right?
Yes.
So I believe it's Mr. Dalton that's immediately south of you that he basically hates his property.
Okay.
I assume you've been by.
Yeah.
And what is your tenant farmer's name?
Jason Graham.
Okay. And you know him?
Yes.
And you've known him quite a while?
Yeah.
Okay. Have you talked to him? Does he intend to keep farming this for you, or do you know whether he will? Because you asked.
I don't know whether he will.
Okay. Why are you concerned that he might not farm it for you anymore?
Because the crop production in this area is not that great.
Okay. And if he doesn't, you still want to do something with the tillable land, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. You're seeking a special use for the 28 acres, and you and I have talked about that. And can you tell us why we're doing 28 acres? Why you didn't divide off 1 or 2 or 3 acres?
Because the property would have less value if you divided it off.
Okay. Can you think of any way to make it in a good sense way to divide the property?
No.
Okay. We've talked about before that there's been 3 or more attempts to annex the property to the village of Hayworth, and are you acquainted with that?
Yes.
And what happened to those attempts?
They did not happen.
Okay. Is there anything else you'd like to say to the zoning board of appeals?
That me and my family would love to build a house on this piece of property and for our forever home.
Questions?
Questions from the board?
Yeah, I've got one, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to see the map of what is in the city of Hayworth and what isn't. And I don't really understand. It looked like the gravel pit area is in the city of Hayworth, correct?
Brian could probably answer that question too.
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, Brian, okay. I'm directing it to you then. I guess
Okay.
I was kind of wanting to see that map. The map, city of Hayworth encompasses the gravel pit area, right?
Yes.
Okay. And it just doesn't include this little 28 acre piece. Is that the only thing
Correct.
that's excluded?
Yeah, I think if I understand your question.
Yep.
Yes.
It would be, yep. And you've tried to annex that into the city of Hayworth?
Yeah.
Yep.
We went through, we've gone through a lot with the city of Hayworth. The city of Hayworth actually asked us to lay out a plat for the property, a subdivision plat for the property. And we did that, and put it together for an annexation. And they said, no, we don't want to do that. So there have been other occasions, and that was actually formal with the paperwork and plats and everything just provided to them. And there's been a lot going on. This has been going on over years, but we had a purchaser for the property, and because of headaches with getting approval, including Hayworth or the county, they backed out of the property. We then repeated and went to Hayworth again, and their ZBA reconsidered it and said, no, we still don't want it. So we've worked our way through it.
Yep, we've tried that.
As best as we can.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions?
Any other questions on the board? Staff?
No.
Okay, you wanted to, we're probably ready for the pictures.
Yeah, I am. You want to sit down?
There's two of you.
For you.
She's not driving anymore, is she?
No.
So how do we get the pictures up?
You got me. I'm not a computer guy.
Okay.
This guy.
I think they're working on it over there.
Daryl's helping. Daryl's working on it.
Daryl will have them up shortly.
Yeah, you're up.
There we go. I've got a few pictures of, this is heading south on the property. And I wanted to give an idea of how much the timber was. This is the 55-mile-an-hour sign is probably 9-10 feet tall. I'm not quite sure, but the trees are pretty thick. Next slide, please. This is just further down the road. The tree at the right is typical, if not small, compared to some of the others we'll see. Just wanted to give you a grasp of idea of where the trees and everything else were here. And next slide, please. This is the location of the planned house, and I'll have a map with that, which would have been shown earlier if all the stuff that I presented with the application were there. But basically, the house would be sitting right about here. It's hard to see, but off to the left of the picture is the neighbor's house. This house sits on about 12 acres. The neighbor's house sits on about 12 acres. But I wanted to get you a grasp of where the house was. Next slide, please. This gives you an idea of the density of the trees here. This is extremely dense trees, someone's got to do something with it, and Josh seems inclined to do so. And as you can see, the trees exceed the 5-inch trunk limit. And next slide, please. This is just another location, another picture. There's a lot of trees here. 22 acres of trees, and they're very, very thick. Next slide, please. This is typical trees in this area. Those trees are about 36 inches across. I think the one on the left, which is one tree, may be much longer than that. So this qualifies under your ordinance as timbered property that the ordinance has a requirement for. And I'll talk about that in my closing, but next slide, please. This is the hill I had the pleasure of sliding down. it doesn't really seem like a lot because I'm shooting from 6 foot up and the hill's still much taller than me. This is a deer path actually, and I started down it and realized the deer must have had trouble going up it too, coming up it, because that's when I found myself at the bottom. This is not the tallest hill there. There are hills here that are 18 feet high, and this isn't unusual in there. It's very rough in the back area of this property. Next slide, please. This slide tells us a lot, not only because of the shape of the property, but and it's hard for everybody to get a real good view of, but I'm going to talk about the area that has been tilled. Specifically, this slide in the red is where the house will sit, or is anticipated to sit. The blue is the anticipated driveway to preserve tillable land if we can. So this is our goal, and that's why the driveway goes around the edge. Where that edge is, they're not tillable land right up. It's not tilled. There's room to place it there. A couple of things I want to talk about here is the Kickapoo goes along the west side of the property here, and that is very, very rough. And when I say goes along, it depends on which map you look at. It also goes through the property sometimes. So dividing this property up to sell it there's not a lot of rational reason to do that. And so this is difficult. Now, I'm going to be a little bit out of my league because there's things that I don't know about. I've just been told and studied about. The crop field here that's on the prop picture has some limitations. It appears to me that the farmer has planted around the outside edge, and then he's filled in on the inside, which I believe is not terribly unusual. A lot of farmers do that. And if you can see, there's and I understand it to be called point rows. Point rows are where the tractors come up to the previous planted area, and there's a number of places in there where there's poor soil or poor planting or whatever that has resulted in a loss of the crops in some of those areas. The other thing I'd like to note for you is that the area for, especially right at the top, there's not even a lot of room to turn around a tractor at the top, but the same is true at the southwest corner. There's not a lot of room to turn around the tractor. After that area has been planted on the bottom, to fill in, we're only talking about 50 to 100 feet. So I don't know what size tractor Jason's using, but it's not a particularly desirable parcel. The rent on the parcel is $150 or $160 a year for the 6 acres, no more. This has been, it's not a particularly productive piece of property, and we'll get into that as we go on. I'd like to go to the next slide, please. This is a house plan that we submitted to the zoning board with our application. You didn't get a copy of that. It's going to be smaller. Josh and Stephanie have decided to make it a little smaller, and the garage will be on the other side. But basically, it's going to be a one-story house placed here, appropriate for the neighborhood, similar to the neighborhood. And so this is what we're going to do. The next slide, please. This is the property record card from the Supervisor of Assessment's office. And this page tells you it's got 8.13 acres. Next slide, please. This slide says it's got 6.61 acres of cropland and 18.24 acres of other farmland. This Supervisor of Assessments is following state rules on classification of the property, being this there's acreage here that gives us about 24 acres of farmland on this property under the state statutes. The county doesn't have a different definition of division of property. There's no county provisions for that. Next slide, please. This is the other part of the main property. This entire parcel was bought at one time. I've researched back about 120 years. The entire property was in one piece over that 120 years, has been in one piece. And this 208 acres plus the 28 acres makes 236 acres. Next slide, please. What's interesting here is that there's 17.14 acres of cropland and 51.2 acres of other farmland. If you saw the staff's method, staff went through and they cut out stuff. Some of the things they cut out were swales. Some of the things they cut out were farm buildings. There's a couple of grain bins. There's places where there's just grain augers that are stored and other stuff on this property. So total between the two properties, as 236 acres, it has, under the county's taxing provisions, it has 93.19 acres of cropland and other farmland. Next slide, please. This is your GIS page. The GIS page indicates soil productivity indexes. Under your ordinance, anything under 120 falls within the ordinance for land unsuitable for farming. Almost all of this land is under 120. There's a strip here that is 123, I believe, but the remainder of the property is as low as 84. I've looked throughout McLean County. 84 is among the lowest. I only found an 83 one other place in McLean County. 84 is among the lowest soil productivity indexes in McLean County. There's a couple of spots. There's another spot near Hayworth. I found another spot up at near the Mackinac, just a very small spot. The place where 84 is usually lined up, productivity lines up, is often interstate on and off ramps or interchanges. The productivity index is way, way low. So that's an important part, because if the productivity index is this low, the land is not unsuitable, is unsuitable for farming. Next slide, please. This is your topographical map at 2-foot divisions, and you can see that there is some places within the field where there's drops in elevation, but the entire parcel has drops of elevation. If you go to the southwest corner, that's where the drop is 18 feet, and if you go all the way to the Kickapoo, it's 20 feet. So the drops in this property are significant, and my calculations, as rough as they were, suggest that the slopes in some of the areas are as high as 32%. According to your ordinance, property is unsuitable for farming if the slopes are in excess of 5%. So this property is unsuitable for farming according to your ordinance. Next slide, please. According to the University of Illinois Department of Agriculture, the average cash rent in McLean County is $250 an acre. This was 2020 information. The cash rent for Sharp property is $160 an acre for 6 acres. This just isn't very much money for a piece of property. Next slide, please. This is our access permission from the Township Road Commissioner. That was also in the packet that I provided. Next slide, please. This is a trend of development. This is kind of small, and I didn't know how big of a screen you'd get. These are all residential properties. These are all residential properties right here, right next and nearby this piece of property. Yes, there's farmland across the street, but these are all real close nearby. And so I'm going to actually put these on the map for you. So next slide, please. This is a residential trend development. There's two you can't see because that's Morgan and Martin's that are just north of here. The Sharp property is the one at the northwest corner of this map. Mr. Dalton here, just to the south of Sharp, That's a house that's is a recent build along with and then even more recently, it was as a accessory building. Mr. Preston, he's got, I think around 20 some acres, 28 acres, 30 acres. Going down, most of these are all just residences. Some of them are small farmers or farm the land in front of them like Mr. Dalton or Mr. Preston. Some of those houses have, if they're farmers, they don't have any names matching with land nearby. The only one that I know to be a farmer is Johnson at the bottom. Mr. Johnson has farms and he has some stuff around. I know that some of the other people nearby are not farmers. And I know that one of them, the land is just registered to somebody in North Carolina. The trend development for this property in this area is for residential. This is important not only for our purposes, but also for the case law purposes. Next slide, please. I'm going to compare and contrast some of the things that staff has done in this case with Mr. Scharf against some things they did in some other cases. Specifically, this is the Wyant case. Mr. Wyant's case is very, very similar to Mr. Scharf's case, and we'll get there in a short period of time, but I wanted to go through the staff report. Mr. Wyant's LISA is extremely high, and see if I can read it on here. His LISA score, I think, was 243.4, well above the standard for protection of farmland. Next slide, please. Mr. Wyant's property was placed right on, his house was crop production before. So staff has taken a little bit of a different view here, but I'm going to get to that when I do my closing statement. But this was crop production. Next slide, please. There's the LISA score, 243.4. Again, the LISA score for Mr. Scharf's property is 207. The Wyant property was adjacent to farms on two sides, both south and to the west of the property. Staff's findings here are 180 degrees from the subject property, and it's going to be really important as we get to it. But the findings specifically said the proposed special use will not endanger the health, safety, or welfare of the public. You'll notice that staff never addressed health, safety, and welfare of the public in the first standard. They never actually presented any evidence. They just don't like the fact that the way they interpret what's going on. Number two is the staff also finds that the proposed dwelling for the use of agriculture tract is compatible with the nearby properties. There is nothing different from putting a house on this property than putting a house on Mr. Scharf's property. They're going to have no difference at all between the two of them. What's also interesting is the third one is nearby land is suitable for crop production will remain suitable for crop production. It will. Same is true for Mr. Scharf's property. Nearby land will be suitable for crop production. Next slide, please. And it was recommended. Next slide, please. Now, what's important here is Mr. Wyant had the 40 acres to the south here. There was 40 acres to the north owned by his father. That 40 acres to the north can't be used or counted toward acreage for the south parcel because there was already a house in that southeast corner of that property. So Mr. Scharf, the staff did not go through and cut out areas and say, okay, this is not a farm because this is how many acres you have. They didn't do that. If they had done that, Mr. Wyant would only have 7.93 acres of tillable, and the house was placed on tillable land. I'm not saying you did anything wrong. I'm saying that Mr. Scharf is receiving inconsistent treatment between his treatment of analysis of the property and this analysis of the property. Nothing in the ordinance provides for dividing the property up for determination whether the parcel is a farm, as staff did in Mr. Scharf's property. If they had done that, Mr. Warrant would not be sitting in his house today, and he did build the house. Next slide, please. Staff's used the word ordinarily. You don't put a house on tillable land. That's not true. This is a Traeger case, another case where it's tillable land. If you can recognize that as you can. You can also see that the fact that the Lisa score was extremely high. Traeger Lisa score, I think, was 239 or something like that. Next slide, please. Again, the existing land use for where the house was going to go was crop production, and it's been crop production forever. Next slide, please. Lisa score in this case was the soil score in this case was 95.5, and the Lisa score was 239.5. This was good land. And as staff notes that it's high value for farmland protection, except your ordinance actually uses the word very high value. Anything over 230 is very high value for agricultural protection. Again, staff says proposed use will not hurt the health, safety, and welfare of the public. And the property, dwellings, the farm is compatible with the area. In this case, Mr. Scharf's case, his house is compatible with the area because the other houses in the area. And then again in paragraph 3, nearby land is suitable for crop production, will remain suitable for crop production. Next slide, please. And again, this one was recommended. Next slide, please. This is Garrett property. This is just to the southwest of the subject property, Mr. Scharf's property. And again, in the very, very high Lisa score. Some things come up you look at the staff report. Next slide, please. The property is listed as vacant except for the fact that it was clearly in crop production. Next slide, please. The Lisa score in this was 240.7, again, compared to 207 for this subject property. Again, the ordinance is very high value for farmland protection. And again, nearby land that is suitable for crop protection will continue to be suitable for such use. Next slide, please. And staff recommends it. Next slide, please. I did an analysis of all 65 cases the ZBA has done and considered in the last 4 years and published online. The soil score of 75.9 is the only score below 80. The soils range from 75.9 to 98.1. This property has the lowest soils that you have seen in 4 years. Now, the Lisa scores. This is the third lowest Lisa score. There's 2 others that are just a little bit lower. One of them already has a house on it. It was a solar application. It was between I-74 and the city of Bloomington. It was a very narrow property. The other one is also between the city of Bloomington and I-74. Next slide, please. This just completes some of these indicate that there was no analysis. In the center 2 columns, there's no analysis. That just means the staff did not provide Lisa scores or soil scores and on the reports that I reviewed. Every one of these staff recommended, and for as best I could tell, this zoning board of appeals approved. Next slide, please. Staff was seemingly disturbed by the fact that there was property that went from the village into the rural area. This is the Reworks property. This is actually, I think that's how you say the name. It's formerly a Bickett property. It's this is about half a mile, a little over 3/4 mile away from the subject property. That's clearly a farm. It's adjacent to Hayworth Park, but this is clearly a farm. It's overlapping municipal boundaries. It's gonna happen. It doesn't change whether it's not a farm or not. Next slide, please. This is again, county zoning. This helps if it makes any difference to you, but the county zoning on the old cell barn property, that's where zoning overlaps. The red is actually county zoning. The actually pink is city zoning, but the red is county zoning. It overlaps the old cell barn property, and some of that is tillable. The picture's not very good, but I drove by today and there's some of that tilled. It was in crop production last year. Next slide, please. This is Grove on South 51. Some of that's in M1 and some of it's farmland. It's farmland. Next slide, please. This one indicates the number of acres, and I don't remember off the top of my head the number of acres, but it was, I think, 108, 120. But more important is the next page. Next slide, please. They divide this, the state and the county divided up in cropland and other farmland. There's no division. That this is a consistent method of deciding whether or not farmland is whether it's farmland or not. This is just going and drawing pictures. Next slide, please. This is the Fitzgerald property just north of Hayworth on 51. The zoning is county zoning. It's commercial, and that overlaps the farm. It's in the left is a farm, and that overlaps the farm. It just happens. You guys have dealt with it many, many times. It doesn't change whether or not that's a farm. Next slide, please. That gets to the standards, and I'll talk about those after you ask any questions.
Any questions from the board for what we just saw?
Brian, so tell me again, because I get the Lisa scores and all that stuff, and you showed us ad nauseum all the different examples. So, but what I want to know is what it looks like to me staff is saying is, we're saying we have a farm here, but there's not a lot of farmland on it, and he wants to build the house on the part that is a farmland. So what are you saying is left of the farmland of this particular farm if he builds a house on this tract?
I would expect, as the supervisor assessments does, that he will take out an acre for the house, and which at this point, when the special use is set aside, because it's not been set aside yet, when the special use is set aside, that acre, where the house will be an acre, and they'll reduce the farmland from 24 to 23 acres. The other farmland will on the main parcel will stay farmland on that main parcel.
What are you saying is the main parcel?
Well, the whole thing, the whole 236 acres is the main parcel. I'm sorry, maybe I wasn't clear. The whole 236 acres is the main parcel. According to, I'm sorry.
That's okay, keep going.
According to the supervisor assessments, 93 acres of that entire parcel is farmland. It's cropland and other farmland. Therefore, when it gets split off, the farmland, 24 acres will be taken off of that 93 acres or 90 whatever acres of farmland. So if you talk, have I made it harder to understand that?
No, other than sifting down to that after all the other information. But so what are you saying is the total farmland out of that 93 acres? How much of that is actually farmed according to you?
That 93 acres is all classified as farmland.
But what is actually farmable?
I don't know. I'd have to do the math. It would be adding it all up, but that's not the way it's done. There's nothing in that's not the way the taxing's done. There's nothing about, because farmland extends beyond just what is tillable. It can include areas for swales. It includes areas for trees and timber. It can include areas for other things. So it's not that it can be tilled. It's just that it's all classified as farmland.
Yep, but you understand that, we're here to protect our natural resources, and one of the main things is tillable farmland. And if we're looking at a classified farm and you're taking out the bulk of what is farmable on this particular classified farm.
Well, yeah, you're right, except for the fact that the intent of the district is to protect the most or best farmland. The intent isn't to protect all farmland. If you look at the actual intent of the district in the ordinance, it says that it's the most productive farmland is supposed to be protected. It is not all farmland. And so I appreciate the desire to protect every piece of farmland, but that's not what the ordinance says. And we can't add something to the ordinance that it doesn't say.
So why wouldn't you just get this reclassified if you're not going to farm it?
Reclassified to?
I don't know. Whatever you can build a house on.
Well, reclassified,
Rezone it.
Rezoning it. Well, I've looked at some of the past history of the ZBA, and rezoning something like this has not worked. It just, if you're not going to allow us to put a house on it, are you going to allow us to put many houses on it? I appreciate it. We would have liked to do that, but I can actually tell you there was one about 2 years ago. I don't know all the details about it, but it was near Lake Bloomington where a gentleman tried to rezone first, and the ZBA said no, and then he came back with a special use and the ZBA said yes. So that was our purpose here. We'd already seen that and I also know that the county has had a long time, going back to when I worked with the county has this thing against rural subdivisions, and they're getting harder and harder to put in because of things with the Illinois EPA. But those are the reasons. It just looked too hard to achieve. I mean,
One other question is, do you have any of the neighbors there that you say aren't farmers? How do you, I don't know that they're farmers or not. Are any of them here to say whether or not they're farmers?
No, some of them I've either talked to or dealt with in the past. I can tell you that Mr. Morgan.
We don't have any of the.
Yeah, I've talked to some of them in the past. Some of them I've dealt with. Some of them I've had. Some of them I've did closings on those homes in that area. So that's how I know.
That's all for now.
Any other questions? Questions of staff?
No.
Okay. You down to the closing stage?
I'm ready for closings if you want.
We're ready.
Could I ask
Oh,
one?
wait,
Can I-
we got to go through the process.
Okay.
There's no one out there. Is anyone in the Zoom land want to give testimony or questions or testimony from this witness? We need to give Annie time, Phil.
We had nobody call in and ask questions, but Mary Beth Taylor might have had a question.
Okay, go ahead, Mary Beth.
Yes, I guess this would be addressed to Phil. It seems to me that the emphasis on what your staff said made it unworkable was not only the value of the farmland issue. Could you address that there were other issues that other than the value of the farmland where this house would go, or did I misread that? That it just didn't fit the zoning, or you see what I'm asking? Can you?
I think the confusing part has to do with the idea that this could be set aside as a farmer or a farm owner or the son of a farm owner. And Mr. Hugg brought up several cases, the Wyant case, the Prager case, and the Garrett case. And those were situations where there's like an 80-acre farm field or something, and they're setting aside a small acreage for a center daughter of a farm. And the reason staff didn't feel that this qualified as that is because that 236 acre farm that Mr. Hug is talking about, we don't go to the assessor's office to see how they tax it. We look at it to see how much actual land is in crop production. And that's the site plan that I showed you earlier. If that whole thing had been a farm field and it was in the agriculture district, there wouldn't have been any issue whatsoever. But the problem with it is it's not a farm field. It's not even zoned agriculture, and it's in the village of Hayworth. And so the staff didn't feel that it's fair to treat it like it's the son or daughter of the farm owner, because it really is in crop production. And I think Ms. Turner was looking at that field and trying to figure out where the 93 acres of crop production is. And you could look high and dry to try to find that, and you might find 6 or 20, but that's about it. And they're just small pieces of it. It's been a gravel pit for 40, 50 years.
Okay, that clarifies it for me somewhat anyway. Thank you.
Any other questions? That's good. We got bigger pictures.
Yeah, Jim, when it dropped down to that 75.9 instead of the 95.7 or whatever the numbers were, what did I'm down south here, don't have my paperwork. You know what the soils are. Is that land any good?
You asking me?
Yes.
Not very. It's not highly sought after land, no. For farming, no.
I don't think we should be giving,
There's two things against it. I mean, it's irregular shaped and the soil type is timber soil. Will not produce. You're right. Rick?
I would concur with that.
Okay, any other questions? I think we're ready for our closing statement if you want to give one.
Yes, I do. Mr. Chairman, members of the Zoning Board of Appeals, I appreciate your time today, and I appreciate the perception that I droned on and covered many things multiple times. But this is important. This is important to a young couple who'd like to build a house. And they qualify in a number of different ways, and I've applied in different ways. You can find one and not find another if you chose, but I'm asking that you find all the different ways because all of them apply here. Staff has done some stuff that just doesn't fit in your ordinance, and I've pointed that out, but I'll get a little bit more detail. Josh Sharf's a minority shareholder in this property, as the property is under the corporation, and we've applied as a farm owner, but we've also applied as a child of a farm owner because his parents are the majority of shareholders in the company, and we've also applied under land unsuitable for farming, all under the ordinance. Under your ordinance, a single-family dwelling in this area for a farm owner is a permitted use. A single-family dwelling for a farm owner is a permitted use. A single-family dwelling on land unsuitable for farming is a permitted use. And if it's a child, it's a special use. So right away, the question comes up, why are we here? Well, the only reason we're here is because of the number of acres. There's 28 acres. We know that. It's been very clear and all the way through this. Mr. Sharf intends only to use 1 acre. So the question becomes, why do we look at 28 acres? We have tried to figure out a way to divide this property up and haven't been able to do it. And if you look at the property, if you divide the acreage up much. It's just going to be multiple parcels that can't be used. The timber is difficult to do anything with, and we intend to at least try to maintain it. The farmland is difficult to do anything with because it's very, very poor soil. At 75.9, that is the lowest soil you've seen in 8 years, or 4 years, I'm sorry. It's just not good soil. And I'll get into the actual details, but it is an odd-shaped parcel. That's because of the Kickapoo Creek, and even the farmland is an odd-shaped parcel. And the farmers on the board understand, and I tried to explain it. Farming this thing is not easy. It's not going to be something somebody wants to do. I don't know if we'd have a farmer if Jason didn't farm the other property that we have to the north of this. I don't think he'd farm this if he wasn't farming the other stuff. The south side of the parcel, the east side of the parcel is bordered by the township road. It won't be any interference with the farm across the street. South side of the parcel is bordered by an existing house. And then there's a whole string of houses that go down along that area. This is consistent with the trend of development in the area. We talked about the low soil productivity. And what I want to do is talk about the exact language of the statutes, your ordinances, because this is the one where it gets a little bit confusing. But the ordinance for unsuitable for farming is as follows. And what we've applied under is the land that contains at least 2 of the following conditions. There's 5 conditions. The first condition is highly erodible soils. We're not arguing that. I don't know if it's highly erodible or not. It's just not good soil. The second standard is soils with a productivity index of less than 120. I've shown the pictures. It gets down as low as 84, the lowest in McLean County, second lowest in McLean County, and that's clearly less than 120. That provision doesn't require, nothing in this provision says anything about how much land is tilled. It's entirely possible that your tillable land has extremely low productivity levels, and you're trying to still eke out some sort of money out of the property. In this case, we're trying to eke out enough money on the property to pay the taxes. Third standard, wooded areas containing at least a total of 60 inches of trunk diameter measured at 2 feet above the ground, of trees larger than 5 inches trunk diameter measured 2 feet above the ground. We have 22 acres of huge trees. They're all, some of them are at least 24 to 36 inches in diameter. We hit the 60 inches diameter requirement at the same time. At a minimum, that's only 12 trees. This condition does not require the entire parcel be timber. It does not require the parcel be timber. So we've got 3 of the conditions already. Unusual size or configuration. The property's odd shape is an odd shape, and it is exactly what the zoning ordinance was intending when it put that in there. The average rent's only $160 an acre. That's pretty low. That's pretty well below the McLean County average. It's probably what's pulling the McLean County average down. And for the matter of fact, it's lower than the average in most counties. Part of the problem is that it's so small. 6 acres is not very much to farm, and it's an odd shape. I've run tractors. I've not been a farmer trying to make money off of it, but I'd be concerned about trying to make money off of that. And then the last condition is land with 50% of the area with slopes exceeding 5%. You've seen the pictures, the depths, the drop-offs, and undulating hills in the timber area. The ordinance assumes up to 15%. What that ordinance assumes is the land has 50% with bad slopes. That's pretty clear when it's 22 acres of 28 acres have bad slopes. But the other part of it is it assumes that 50 acres could be level, 50% could be level. You don't take and divide the property up. You don't go through and say, oh, well, we're going to count this part out and count this part in. You take the entire property together. Staff would like to impose a requirement that the house must not be placed on land that's been tilled in the past. You guys have done a lot of these. But if you've read the ordinance, that is not in the ordinance. There's nothing in the ordinance that says you cannot place a house on tilled land, and in fact, it's done. So I think that we got to stick with the ordinance. We got to stand with the law and go with what's being required. In the circumstances of a not suitable for farming, the person seeking the special use does not need to be a farmer, does not need to be a farm owner, and you don't need to have 40 acres at the time of the application. So this application satisfies the statute, your ordinance, at this point. And as staff noted in their report, this land is of very low value for farmland protection. It has one of the lowest Lisa scores to come before this board in 4 years, and it has the lowest soil score. Now, I want to talk about a farm owner really, and I'm sorry it's going to be so long, but it's important to my clients. A farm owner has to have 40 acres, and a farm owner is not required to show his land as poor value. He can actually put his house on land with high productivity. Mr. Scharf has decided not to do that. He has decided not to put his land on property that they have other farmland on that is higher productivity. He's decided to put his house on the land that's the lowest productivity that they have. Kerry Scharf Materials is the farm owner, and we have 236 acres. We also have the 170 and 240. We have never used a child of a farm owner or farm owner grant or provision out of the ordinance ever before. We've never used a unsuitable for farming provision ever before. So we qualify as a farm owner. Now, the 93 acres came up, and what I did is I used the county's supervisor assessments because they follow the state law. There's a state standard of what a property is. The 93 acres does satisfy the county's ordinance. The county tries to separate tillable land from other land. There's no zoning code, and there's no authority in the zoning code to do that. You can look for it, but it's not there because I looked for it. And so for some of you that know me, you know that I used to represent the county and that I worked on the zoning code many times. Illinois courts have rules that the word agricultural purposes. Your farm definition includes a farm is properly used for agricultural purposes. Illinois courts have ruled that the phrase agricultural purposes should be given a very, very broad definition. And unless that phrase agricultural purposes is given a qualifier, such as exclusively, primarily, solely, then agricultural purposes get the very, very broad definition. The Illinois Supreme Court and appellate courts have included trees, brush, waterways, farm dwellings, accessory buildings, sludge pools, bodies of water. Everything is included in a definition of a farm, of agricultural purposes. The courts have also said that the county lacks the authority to impose local conditions on a definition of a farm. So the county, without any authority, cannot say, well, no, that's not a farm because it's not tillable. That is not authorized by state statute. It is not authorized by your ordinance. You cannot make those distinctions. I provided a copy of the circumstance where the staff did not follow your ordinance, or did follow your ordinance, and that's the Wyant case. Mr. Dix said, well, that was 80 acres. No, it wasn't 80 acres if you remember the picture. The picture showed that there was already a house on 40 acres of that 80 acres. That house only had 16 acres of tillable land. The 40 acres were the other part of that. You can have up to one house per 40 acres. Mr. Wyant's son was on the lower 48 acres, and that only had 7.93 acres of tillable land. And as I said before, it's not that you did it wrong, In that case, it would be done wrong in this case if that was done. You cannot treat people unequally. We call that a violation of the Equal Protection Clause. You don't pick one person and say, I'm going to treat them this way, and pick another person and treat them this way. The practical issue is that farms extend across swales, timber, driveways, creeks, roads, township boundaries, municipal boundaries, and zoning boundaries at many places in the county. I've included a number of those in my presentation. There is no provision in your ordinance that says a farm can't extend across boundaries, zoning boundaries, municipal boundaries, or anything else. The courts assume that if the county intended to do that, they would put that language into their ordinances. That's not in your ordinance. It's not a part of the law. Additionally, the state has basically limited the county's authority to rule and make decisions in agricultural properties. And the state law limits what you can say about one property or another property, especially when it comes to agriculture. Because the staff took a harsh approach and actually read the standards, and I vehemently disagree with the standards, I would like to go through the standards for you. And if you could put the next slide up, please. Okay. This is the first standard under your ordinance. The proposed special use will not be detrimental and endanger the health, safety, moral, comfort, or welfare of the public. This is an important standard. Why? Because the United States Supreme Court has ruled that public regulations are unconstitutional unless they substantially promote the health, safety, morals, comfort, and welfare of the public. If you read the staff report, it made no mention of the health, safety, morals, comfort, or welfare of the public. This is important. Single-family dwellings are a permitted use in the ag district. This is a legislative determination by the county board that single-family homes are not detrimental to or endanger the health, safety, morals, or comfort, or the welfare of the public. It's already been done. Because they are permitted uses, it suggests that they've already decided that this is a safe thing to go into an ag district. I'd also point out that the ag waiver suggests that the ag property, and I'll note up here on your screen that the Farm Nuisance Suit Act also indicates agricultural uses are more a threat to residential uses than they are to ag uses. The evidence is that there's existing houses in this area, no evidence that the home is detrimental to or endanger the health, safety, morals, or comfort, or welfare of the public. This standard is met. Next slide, please. The proposed special use will not be injurious to the use and enjoyment of other property in the immediate vicinity or substantially diminish property values. Again, staff did not address this standard in their language of in their staff report. It's a permitted use in the area, so it's not going to be injurious to use and enjoyment of other property. Otherwise, we have to get a special use for every house even in a residential area. The land to the south is a residence. It's the same use. And north to the west is a gravel operation. That's a more intense use than a residence. And the land to the east is ag use. It's not affected. See your ag waiver. The bigger question is, and this is a flip side of does this use damage any other property? The Supreme Court has also said that if there's a restriction on the property and that restriction reduces the value of that property, that restriction must promote the health, safety, morals, comfort, and welfare of the public. This property is clearly more valuable as a home than as farmland or as 6 acres at $160 an acre. Regulations for regulation's sake don't apply. This land is not worth very much as farmland and has no benefit to the public by restricting its use. Special use, next slide, please. The special use will not impede the orderly development of the surrounding property. The trend of development is already residential. There's nothing about the special use that will impact any surrounding owner's use of the property, or for that matter, any farmer owner's use of the property. As the staff usually reports in these cases, farmers will still be able to plow their fields and harvest their crops. Next, the next two, adequate utilities, access roads, drainage, and other necessary facilities have been or will be provided. That's it, standards met. And ingress and egress has been provided, so that's been met. Next slide, please. The establishment, maintenance, and operation of special use will be in conformance with the intent of the district in which the special use is be located. Two of the objectives of the intent of the agricultural district, if you look at your ordinance, are specifically to provide for residential uses in the ag district, including non-farm uses. One objective is to promote the use of agricultural land that is most suitable for farming activities. This is the one I would, Julia, I'm sorry, this is the one I was trying to say and stumbled over. Promote the use of agricultural land that is most suitable for farming activities. Not that it's just suitable, but most suitable. This land is not the most suitable for farming activities. One additional objective is to conserve and protect the open space and wooded areas. That's what Mr. Scharf would like to do. This special use would do that. So we satisfy 4 of the standards objectives of the district. And again, residential uses are permitted use. The history of residential uses and sheer number approved indicate the establishment and maintenance of a simple home is in conformance with the district. This standard is met. Next slide, please. Staff used this provision for a different reason, but this is what it's actually intended for. Does the property meet the minimum lot area? Does it meet the lot width? Are the impervious service coverage? Will the house meet the size requirements? It will have a pitch of a 412 pitch. These are the things, all other respects, the applicable regulations of the district, and these are the other regulations of the district. This standard is met. And I'll wrap up. The special use process isn't a method for a landowner to prove he should be able to use his property in a particular manner. Rather, the process is to ensure that the county doesn't interfere with a person's right to use the property as he chooses, unless there's a substantial and compelling public interest to be saved. Regulation for regulation's sake is not that. The reduction of the value of this property is to about $700. That's after taxes. That's $700 from this property a year. This property is not beneficial, and the reduction of the value of this property doesn't provide any benefit to the public anywhere. Rather, the evidence is that the trend of development for this property is residential. There's no other impact on other property and nearby farms. The construction of this home will not harm the public's health, safety, or welfare. Accordingly, we would ask that the board approve this special use under all 3 provisions. Thank you.
Thank you. The Sharp's gonna make a closing statement. Okay, this part of the hearing is closed, and I think we need to stop and talk about it a little bit before we go to any kind of standards. Who wants to be first?
I can tackle it.
Go ahead.
One of Phil's comments was that there's a lot of other parcels in the county that we would be setting a precedence for here. That's a new consideration that I think we need to weigh. So I'm leaning towards let's deal with them on a case-by-case basis, and that's what we're here for. Is we're a zoning board of appeals, and we can tolerate this one, is what I'm suggesting. Not only tolerate it, but endorse and approve it. And also be a taxing vehicle for the county.
I just think, it's important for us to guide people to get things done the right way and not continually make exceptions. And this particular one, we don't even have a 40-acre farm to be considered. That, to me, is obvious, that we don't even have the basic thing that it takes to qualify under this ordinance or what they're asking us to do. That's the basic thing. And we don't even have that, which tells me that it needs to be directed, that they need to look at, how is this zoned? What's the correct way to have it? this area is an issue. It has been an issue. And I think that our doing this is going to do nothing but convolute the area even more.
There we go. Help me on the issue then of just right next door to it, if that's what you're kind of thinking, Julia. There are a whole lot of houses. And so it kind of fits in what's happening in that area. And the land doesn't appear to be worth a lot agriculturally. I'm struggling with that.
No, and I understand that, but what I'm saying is it is zoned agricultural right now, and those other houses were built on farms that qualified under that. What we've got is agricultural butting up to manufacturing. We don't have a residential area out there, and it's just not a real clear. And in other cases, you know, I know Mr. Hug brought up the cases that he found supported this, but I think of, you know, the case out by Kamlara Park that we said no to out there when they were wanting to increase, you know, people living out there. It didn't fit with what was going on out there. To me, that's what keeps it bringing here. They own this land. They own all of it. I think it's just time we get it zoned correctly. If they want to develop it, then let's look at doing things the right way rather than patching it in.
So the other houses that you showed were all on agricultural, on farms, is what you're saying, and they just allowed like one house per farm for the owner or for a son of the owner?
All I know is there's not residential out there. Phil, you can answer that maybe.
There's no residential.
Mr. Chairman,
We can't talk, you know better than that.
I know, but if we're going to reopen the evidence, I would like to address,
We can't.
okay, then Mr. Dick can't talk either.
I've always allowed him to. There was one question asked Mary, Julia said the Kamlara Park was a difference in, it wasn't about a single residence, they wanted a subdivision and the road wasn't adequate for it, if I remember that right. So it's not really the same. I'm just making a point.
Mm-hmm.
I can see why Phil can't do anything with this in his office, but I think we as a board need to look what's the best use for the property. I've drove past the property and looked at it. It's not adequate. I mean, it can be farmed. I'm not saying that, but it's not farm ground. There's houses all around it, not to the east, but to the south. And I think that the development, I mean, I don't know how you say it, but it looks like it's housing would be the proper use of this property, because houses are south and the southeast or southeast and all around it. And I know it's not 40 acres by what we've used in the past, but I'm kind of like Rick. I think it's a one-shot deal, and you have to maybe we got to look at these a little closer. I think the thing is worthless for farming, and if you can put a house on it, you're making it better. And I know Phil couldn't do it because he didn't have the tools to do it. Maybe we do.
Well, I mean, assuming we can kind of I am sympathetic that the best use might be a residence on this particular parcel. But I guess, Julia or someone, what would be the best process or the best way to get this moved forward? I would agree. I hate to make exceptions to our rules because I think it just makes it worse, in the future. But how could they make this happen? How could they build a house on this? What would need to happen?
To address that, Ruth, I think that they've tried every avenue. They indicated to us in testimony here that they've tried every avenue within the city of Hayworth, which it touches. And I'm not sure that the county, I'm not sure how successful they would be in the county realm either. But I don't really know the answer to your question.
I think that's when clear minds get together and decide what they want to do. And if we can make a consensus of what we want to do, and the county board can make their choice, so they decide they don't want to do it, or they do it. I think it would probably come down to that. What do you think, Mr. Zimmerman? Well, I see Mr. Kurtz is going to talk.
Yep, both of them.
I look at how many sons and daughters of farm owners that we have had come in, and we've allowed them under that because they owned a bunch to take an acre of flat black, just as black as you can be, to put a house on. And here's a piece of dirt that they're struggling to get a crop out of. It just seems like it makes a whole lot more sense to do something with a property than just let it sit there.
Yes. Yeah, I see that they're proposing to take essentially 1 acre of the 6 or 7 acres that are tillable there, and it's on the edge, and it's not great soil. They would just take a fraction of it, and presumably, whether they still farm the other 5 acres or so on the edge there, they're just trying to keep it on the edge, and it's on the edge of the creek, trying to build up on the hill. They put the road around the edge, not across the middle of the field. So I don't think we can stipulate that they would continue to farm the 5 of the 6 or 7 acres that are tillable. That's not our prerogative to specify, but it looks like that's what their plan is. Looks like a wonderful spot. Pardon?
Maybe they can put a berm up on it. You like berms?
Yeah, I do like berms, but it is essentially a berm. It's essentially next to it's a small really hard to farm parcel by conventional farming because it's only 6.4 acres that's tillable in there, and they're just carving off a little bit of the edge. So that seems like a reasonable use of the land on a parcel. This is not a 40 acres of black dirt that they're trying to carve up. This is very marginal land. I realize it is under 40 acres, and I think that's where Rick Dean's point of taking a parcel and looking at it individual piece by individual piece. So I think they've got precedent that we've allowed almost every farmer's child to have the house, even if it wasn't exactly 40 acres. But I didn't follow exactly all of that analysis. So I think this is an okay use of the land.
You have something else, Mary Beth?
No, I don't have any other questions. Thank you.
So does anybody else want to chime in on this, or are we ready to make a vote or a motion or something? For my part, I'm kind of like Drake. We've had houses on the best farmland in McLean County. It's got underneath the house, and there's nothing we can do about it. And here we got a house that, or a farm that is junk, and we can't put a house on it. It doesn't make sense. That's why, I think cool minds could come to the conclusion that maybe this isn't a bad deal.
And I absolutely understand all of that. I think, though, what we've done in the past is really tried to get people to have their land when it's doesn't qualify purely under one. And this, to me, this is a pretty good stretch. I mean, I feel like it's pretty far from 40. We try to get them, worked into getting it zoned appropriately so that they can do with it what they want. And I don't know what the differences are as far as, what you have to qualify if they were to get it residential. I know they tried to annex it into the town and the town didn't want it. I don't know why that is. But if we're looking at it as non-farmable land, well, how would it look like to subdivide the land if that were the case? And I didn't hear that they had tried to do anything like that. And what does that mean as far as tax differences? Are they getting an advantage in having a house in an agricultural district versus a residential? I don't know the answers to any of those.
I don't know the answers either, but I don't think this big enough parcel to subdivide. And if it would, you get into EPA rules now are so stringent that you can't put more than one house on a parcel because you can't get a septic to pass. So it's things in the county now are just about done as far as subdivisions.
And to address Julia's concern, I've done a little bit of research on this to see if it mattered whether or not it was part of a farm or we lop off my residence where I live and call it that. There's really no large advantage, the way I understand it. You've got a $500,000 house or a $200,000 house, it's going to be taxed. Is my understanding, and I could be incorrect in that, but I think that taxation is supposed to be fairly uniform.
Well, are we ready for a motion?
I believe so. I would like to recommend approval of case number SU-20-16.
I'll second it.
Okay, we have a motion by Dean, a second by Kurtz. Could we have a roll call vote to approve?
Taylor,
Yes.
Kurtz,
Yes.
Dean,
Yes.
Turner,
No,
Novosad,
Yes.
Finnegan,
Yes.
Zimmerman.
Yes.
Motion pass. I think Bill can fill you in.
This goes as a recommendation to the county board at their meeting on March 11th at 5:30 p.m. It'll be on the consent agenda unless somebody pulls it off the consent agenda. You can call our office the next morning and find out the decision, or you can listen to it on YouTube.
Okay, I think we are adjourned unless somebody else has something they want to talk about. This is probably the longest one we've ever had
Next meeting?
for a single. It's a good thing we had any more cases. We've cut it short. But I wanted to make sure everybody was heard, so I appreciate your patience.
Thank you much. Great job.
Thank you.
Yeah.